Before we get started, if you're in healthcare or you've ever wondered what really happens in hospitals at night, hit that subscribe button. Drop a like if you want more stories from the night shift. And I'm curious, where are you watching from and what time is it? Comment below, because time matters in this story. Especially 3:47 a.m. Let's get into it. My name is Skylar Mitchell, and I've been an ICU nurse at St. Catherine's Hospital for 7 years. 5 of those years have been on night shift, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., 3 nights a week. If you've never worked nights in a hospital, you don't know real quiet. The kind of quiet that makes every beep, every alarm, every footstep echo like it's the only sound in the world. St. Catherine's is old. Built in 1923 as a tuberculosis sanatorium, converted to a general hospital in the 1950s, expanded in the 80s and 90s. The ICU is in the original building. High ceilings, thick walls, windows that don't quite close right. Administration keeps promising to move us to the new wing, but it never happens. Budget constraints, they say. Structural issues, they say. I think they just don't want to be in the old building at night. The ICU has 8 beds. Rooms 1 through 8, arranged in a horseshoe around the nurses' station. During day shift, all 8 rooms stay full. Trauma, post-surgical, cardiac events, overdoses. Urban hospital, so we see everything. But at night, especially after midnight, it gets quiet. Visiting hours end at 9 p.m. Doctors finish their rounds by 10. By 11, it's just us nurses, maybe a respiratory therapist, security making their rounds, and the patients, of course, the ones fighting to stay alive while their bodies try to shut down. Room 4 is different. I didn't notice it at first. When you're new to night shift, you're just trying to stay awake, stay alert, keep your patients stable. You don't have time to notice patterns, but after about 6 months, I started to see it. Room 4 patients died more than others. Not slightly more, significantly more. I started keeping informal notes, just dates and times in the back of my personal planner. Nothing official, just curiosity. In 6 months, Room 4 had 14 patients. 9 of them died. Room 3, right next door, 12 patients, 2 deaths. Room 5, on the other side, 11 patients, 1 death. Room 4, 9 out of 14. And they all died at the same time. 3:47 a.m. Not approximate. Not around 3:45 or almost 4 o'clock. Exactly 3:47 a.m. I started checking the code blue records, the time of death documentation. Every single Room 4, death logged at 3:47:00. I told myself it was coincidence. Hospitals have rhythms. The circadian low point is around 3 to 4 a.m. That's when the body is weakest, when patients who are going to crash usually crash. It made sense statistically, but 14 different patients with 14 different conditions, all dying at the exact same minute? I started watching Room 4 more carefully. The first time I deliberately stayed near Room 4 approaching 3:47 a.m. was a Tuesday in March. The patient was a 68-year-old man, Mr. Harrison, recovering from cardiac surgery. Stable vitals, good prognosis. The kind of patient who'd be out of ICU in 2 days. At 3:30 a.m., I positioned myself at the nurse's station with a clear view of his room. His monitors showed steady rhythms. Oxygen saturation at 97%. Blood pressure normal. Heart rate 72 beats per minute. At 3:45 a.m., I got up to check on him directly. Stood in the doorway. He was sleeping peacefully. The monitors continued their steady beeping. 3:46 a.m., still stable. At 3:47 a.m., his heart stopped, not slowed, not became irregular, just stopped. Flatline. Immediate cardiac arrest. I hit the code blue button and started compressions. The team arrived within seconds. We're good at that. Practiced. We worked on him for 40 minutes. Advanced cardiac life support, everything by the book. He never came back. Time of death, 3:47 a.m. The attending physician ruled it sudden cardiac death. Probably a complication from surgery. Rare, but not unheard of. I didn't mention that I'd been watching him die at the exact minute I'd predicted. After that, I started tracking more carefully. Not just deaths, but which patients were assigned to room 4. I cross-referenced with our scheduling system, with admission records, with anything I could access without raising questions. The pattern became clearer. Room 4 had been in continuous use since the hospital opened in 1923. I found records going back decades, old nursing logs that had been digitized, incident reports, mortality reviews, and there it was, over and over. Patients in room 4 dying at 3:47 a.m. 1956. Patient expired at 3:47 hours. 1963. Code blue, room 4, 03:47 hours. Patient deceased. 1971. Sudden deterioration. Room 4. Approximately 03:45 to 03:50 hours. 1982. Unexpected mortality. Room 4, 03:47 hours. On and on. 60 years of deaths, all at the same time. I started asking the older nurses, the ones who'd been at St. Catherine's for 20, 30 years. Most brushed it off. Room 4 has always been unlucky, they'd say. Try not to put critical patients there if you can avoid it. But one nurse, Barbara, who'd been on night shift since 1995, pulled me aside after I brought it up. "You've noticed," she said. It wasn't a question. "The 3:47 thing?" "Yeah." Barbara looked around the empty nurses' station. It was 2 a.m. quiet period before the danger hour. "I've kept records for 28 years. Room 4 has a 64% mortality rate on night shift. Every other room averages 18 to 22%. And yes, they all die at 3:47, every single one. Why hasn't anyone reported this? Done something about it?" We tried. 3 times that I know of. 1997, 2004, and 2011. Each time, administration ordered a full review. They checked equipment, wiring, air quality, everything. Found nothing wrong. Called it statistical clustering, confirmation bias. Said we were seeing patterns that weren't there. But they are there. Of course they are. But hospitals don't like admitting they have a room where patients die at the same time every night. Bad for business. Bad for lawsuits. So they bury it in paperwork and tell us to stop making up ghost stories. Ghost stories? Barbara's expression darkened. "You know this building was a TB sanatorium originally, right? Before modern antibiotics, TB was a death sentence. They'd bring patients here to die slowly, drowning in their own lungs. The treatment was fresh air and rest. That's why the windows are so big, why the ceilings are so high. They thought it would help. It didn't. No. Hundreds of people died in this building between 1923 and 1947, mostly at night, when their lungs would finally give out. And room 4, that was the execution chamber." I stared at her. "What?" "Not official, but that's what they called it. When a patient was clearly dying, when there was nothing more to do, they'd move them to room 4. Let them pass without disturbing the other patients. The room was specifically designated for terminal cases, and most of them died in the early morning hours when the body gives up. At 3:47 a.m., that's what the old records suggest." though back then, timekeeping wasn't as precise. But there are references to the morning death hour and the 4 a.m. transition. Seems like 3:47 was when most of them let go. So you think the room is, what, haunted? Barbara shrugged. I think something about that room makes people die at 3:47 a.m. Whether it's ghosts, electromagnetic interference, structural issues, or just really bad luck, I don't know. But I know I never put patients in room 4 unless every other bed is full. And I make damn sure I'm watching that clock when it gets close to 3:47. After that conversation, I couldn't let it go. I started researching the building's history, digging through city archives, old newspaper articles, anything I could find about St. Catherine's. The sanatorium had been controversial from the start. Built on land that used to be a cemetery, a pauper's field for indigent dead, cleared in 1921 to make room for the hospital. The bodies had been supposedly relocated, but records were incomplete. Some estimates suggested as many as 300 bodies had never been moved, just built over. Room 4 sat directly above what had been the cemetery's northern section, the recent dead area, where bodies were buried before being moved to permanent graves if families could afford it. Most couldn't. Most stayed in the ground, in unmarked graves, under what eventually became the hospital's foundation. I found a newspaper article from 1947, when the sanatorium converted to a general hospital, St. Catherine's Sanatorium to become Modern Hospital. After 24 years of service to tuberculosis patients, St. Catherine's will reopen as St. Catherine's General Hospital this fall. The transition has been complicated by reports of structural issues in the original building. Several staff members have reported unusual occurrences, particularly in the North Wing's 4th room, which hospital administrators have sealed pending investigation. We take all concerns seriously, said Hospital Director Dr. Robert Vogel. Any room showing signs of structural instability will be thoroughly evaluated before reopening to patients. The room in question reportedly experienced several patient deaths under unusual circumstances, though hospital staff declined to provide specifics. They'd sealed room 4 in 1947. For how long? And why had they reopened it? I kept digging. Found a memo from 1952, so they'd sealed it for 5 years, found nothing wrong, and reopened it. And patients had been dying at 3:47 a.m. ever since. I needed to know more about what happened during those 5 years. What had they found that made them seal the room? What had scared the staff enough to report unusual occurrences? The hospital's archives were in the basement. Old paper records that hadn't been digitized, stored in boxes that nobody looked at anymore. I went down there on my lunch break one night, told security I was researching for a quality improvement project. The basement was exactly what you'd expect. Dusty, poorly lit, full of bankers' boxes labeled by decade. I found the 1940s boxes and started searching. Most of it was routine. Supply orders, staffing schedules, patient intake forms. But buried in a box marked Administrative 1947 was a folder labeled North Wing Incident Reports. Inside were handwritten statements from nurses who'd worked the sanatorium's final years. Statements about Room 4. March 12, 1947. Night nurse Skylar Blackwell reports patient in room 4 expired at approximately 3:45 a.m. However, patient continued to exhibit movement for several minutes after death was pronounced. Movement described as reaching toward window and attempting to speak. Attributed to post-mortem muscle spasms. April 3, 1947. Night nurse Helen Rodriguez reports multiple patients in adjacent rooms became agitated at 3:47 a.m., all pointing toward room 4 and speaking of the collector. No patient currently assigned to room 4. attributed to shared delusion possibly caused by medication interactions. May 18, 1947. Night nurse Margaret Walsh requests transfer from night shift following incident in room 4. Patient expired at 3:47 a.m., verified by attending physician. However, Nurse Walsh reports seeing patient still in bed after body was removed for morgue transport. She describes translucent figure that remained in room until approximately 4:15 a.m. Psychiatric evaluation recommended. There were dozens of these reports, all describing strange occurrences around 3:47 a.m., all centered on room 4, patients dying and not staying dead, other patients seeing things, staff experiencing unexplainable phenomena. The final report in the folder was dated June 1947, signed by the hospital director. Following repeated incidents and staff concerns regarding room 4, I am ordering the immediate sealing of said room pending full investigation. Until we can determine the cause of these disturbances, whether environmental, psychological, or otherwise, no patients will be housed there. The well-being of our staff and patients must take priority. Attached was a news clipping, different from the one I'd found earlier. This one was from a smaller local paper. TB Sanatorium nurses report death collector in haunted room night shift nurses at St. Catherine's. Sanatorium claim that room 4 is visited nightly by what they describe as the collector, a presence that appears at approximately 3:47 a.m. to gather the dying. According to staff reports, patients in room 4 frequently die at this exact time, and those who survive the night often report seeing a figure in outdated clothing standing at the foot of their bed during the early morning hours. Hospital administration denies any supernatural activity, attributing the reports to overwork and the stressful nature of caring for terminal patients. However, they have sealed room 4 indefinitely, citing ongoing investigation into environmental factors. I sat there in the dusty basement, reading about events from 77 years ago that were still happening, still playing out every night at 3:47 a.m. The collector. I thought about all the patients I'd seen die in room 4. Thought about Mr. Harrison's heart just stopping at exactly 3:47. Thought about the way they all went, not fighting, not struggling, just stopping. Like something had switched them off. Like something had collected them. My shift started in 2 hours. Room 4 currently had a patient, Mrs. Vogel, 71, pneumonia. Not critical, but not stable. I'd been avoiding the room as much as possible, only going in when absolutely necessary. But tonight, I was going to watch. Really watch. See what happened at 3:47 a.m. See if the collector came. My shift started at 7 p.m. like always. I got report from the day nurse. Standard handoff. Mrs. Vogel in room 4 was stable. Oxygen saturation good. Responding to antibiotics. Expected to transfer to step-down unit within 48 hours. Unless she died at 3:47 a.m. I didn't tell the day nurse what I was planning. Didn't tell anyone. Just took my assignment and started my rounds. Check vitals, administer medications, document everything. The routine comfort of hospital work. By 11 p.m., the ICU had settled into night mode. Lights dimmed, monitors glowing. That particular quality of silence that only exists in hospitals after midnight. My coworker that night was James, a newer nurse who'd been on night shift for about 8 months. Good nurse, competent, but he hadn't been there long enough to notice patterns. You ever notice anything weird about room 4? I asked him around 1 a.m. We were both at the nurse's station, catching up on charting. Weird? How? Just anything unusual. He thought about it. Not really. Why? No reason, just wondering. I couldn't tell him. If I said, I think something collects souls at 3:47 a.m., he'd report me to management. Maybe suggest I needed a psych eval, better to watch alone. At 2 a.m., I checked on Mrs. Vogel. She was sleeping peacefully, oxygen running at 2 liters, monitors showing good numbers. Heart rate 78, blood pressure 128/82, oxygen saturation 96%. Everything normal. I adjusted her blanket, checked her IV line, then positioned the chair near her bed where I could see both her and the monitors clearly. Just going to sit with her for a bit, I told James when he walked by. She was restless earlier. Want to make sure she stays calm. He nodded and continued his rounds. Standard practice. Sometimes patients need a presence nearby to stay settled. I sat in the dark room, watching the monitors cast their green and blue glow across the walls. The building was quiet except for the usual sounds. Distant beeping, footsteps in the hallway, the low hum of medical equipment. At 3 a.m., I felt it. The temperature dropped. Not dramatically, maybe 5 degrees, but noticeable. I pulled my sweater tighter and checked the thermostat on the wall. It read 72 degrees Fahrenheit, same as always. Mrs. Vogel stirred in her sleep. Her heart rate ticked up slightly, 78/85, still normal range but elevated. 3:15 a.m. Her oxygen saturation dropped from 96% to 93%. Not critical, but declining. I stood up, checked her breathing. She seemed fine, just sleeping deeper. The monitor adjusted and the numbers stabilized at 94%. 3:30 a.m. The air in the room felt thick, heavy, like pressure building before a storm. I've been a nurse long enough to trust my instincts, and every instinct was screaming that something was wrong. Mrs. Vogel's eyes opened. She wasn't fully awake, more like that half-conscious state where patients surface briefly before sliding back into sleep. But she was looking at something. Not at me, not at the monitors, at the corner of the room, the far corner by the window. "Who's there?" she mumbled. "Just me, Mrs. Vogel. You're in the hospital. You're safe." "No," she said, her voice clearer now. "The man. In the corner. Who is he?" I looked, saw nothing, just shadows and the dim glow from the hallway light filtering through the door. "There's no one there, Mrs. Vogel. You're dreaming. He's wearing old clothes. Like a doctor from old times, he's watching me." Her heart rate was climbing. 85, 90, 95. He's coming closer. I checked the corner again. Nothing. But the temperature had dropped further. I could see my breath now, just faintly. 3:40 a.m. Mrs. Vogel was fully awake now, but not agitated. Calm, too calm. The kind of calm you see in patients who've accepted they're dying. "He says it's almost time," she said softly. "Time for what?" "Time to go. He collects us. He's been collecting us for a long time. He says it's kind, says it's better than suffering." Her heart rate was 102 now, but her blood pressure was dropping. 110/70, 105/68. Her body was shutting down, and I couldn't see why. 3:45 a.m. I hit the call button, bringing James into the room. "What's wrong?" he asked, looking at the monitors. "I don't know. She's decompensating. Blood pressure dropping, heart rate climbing. No obvious cause." We checked everything. IV lines, oxygen delivery, breathing sounds. Everything was in place, functioning correctly. But Mrs. Vogel's vitals continued to decline. "He's here now," she said, still calm, "right beside the bed. He's very old, very tired, but he has a job to do." "Mrs. Vogel, there's no one here but us," James said, checking her pupils with his penlight. "He says you can't see him, says only the ones he comes for can see him. He's been doing this since—" She paused, thinking. "Since 1923. That's when he started. That's when they gave him this room. 3:46 a.m. Her oxygen saturation dropped to 88%. Her heart rate spiked to 115. "We need to call a code," James said, reaching for the emergency button. "Wait!" Mrs. Vogel grabbed my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "He says to tell you, you can't stop this. This room belongs to him. 3:47 is his time. He's been given permission to collect at this time in this room. It's the price for the hospital." "What price? Who gave permission?" "The ones who built it. They made a deal. The land wanted payment for being disturbed. The graves wanted compensation. So they gave him this room, this time. Let him collect his due, otherwise." She trailed off, eyes widening. "Otherwise, he'd take everyone. This limits him, contains him. One room, one time. That's the deal." 3:47 a.m. Mrs. Vogel's heart stopped. Not slowed, not became irregular, just stopped. Complete cardiac arrest at exactly 3:47:00. James hit the code blue button while I started compressions. The team arrived. We worked the code, did everything right. But I knew how this ended. I'd seen it before. Time of death, 3:47 a.m. After they took her body away, after the paperwork was done, after James had gone to sit in the break room trying to process what had happened, I stood in room 4 alone. The temperature was normal again. The oppressive feeling had lifted. Whatever had been here was gone. I looked at the corner where Mrs. Vogel had seen the man. Just empty space. Just shadows. But I believed her. Believed she'd seen something. Believed there was a collector who came at 3:47 a.m. to claim his due. And if what she'd said was true, if this was some kind of deal, some agreement made when the hospital was built, then closing the room wouldn't stop it. The collector had been given this space, this time. Trying to end the deal might make things worse. I thought about the basement records, the 1947 reports of patients seeing things, of staff experiencing phenomena. The room had been sealed for 5 years. 5 years when the collector couldn't do his work in room 4. What had happened during those 5 years? Had he stopped collecting? Or had he collected somewhere else? I needed to find mortality records from 1947 to 1952. See if deaths at 3:47 a.m. had spread to other rooms when room 4 was sealed. The next night, I was back in the basement archives. Found the mortality logs from 1947 to 1952. They were handwritten, ink faded, but legible. 1947. Room 4 sealed in June. For the rest of that year, no deaths at 3:47 a.m. in any room. In fact, night shift mortality dropped significantly. 1948, January. First death at 3:47 a.m. Room 7. Then another in room 1. Then room 3. By end of year, deaths at 3:47 a.m. had occurred in 6 different rooms. 1949. Deaths at 3:47 a.m. in all 8 ICU rooms. Multiple occurrences in each room. Night shift mortality rate doubled from previous years. 1950. Same pattern. Deaths spreading, mortality climbing. 1951. Same pattern, but now staff reports increased. Nurses seeing things in multiple rooms. Patients in all rooms reporting visitors at 3:47 a.m. Several staff members quit. Difficulty maintaining night shift coverage. 1952, April. Room 4 reopened. May. Last death at 3:47 a.m. in room 7. June, onward. Deaths at 3:47 a.m. only in room 4. Mortality rate in other rooms returns to normal. The pattern was clear. seal room 4, and the collector spreads his work across the entire ICU. Open room 4, and he stays contained there. It wasn't a haunting, it was a containment. Room 4 wasn't cursed, it was a cage. I found one more document, a letter dated April 1952, from Dr. Robert Vogel to the hospital board. Gentlemen, following 5 years of observation and unfortunate outcomes, I must recommend the immediate reopening of room 4 in the north wing. The sealing of this room in 1947 was done with good intentions, following reports of unusual phenomena. However, the unintended consequence has been a dispersal of these phenomena throughout the facility, resulting in significantly elevated mortality rates and severe staffing challenges. I realize this recommendation contradicts our previous position. However, the evidence is undeniable. Whatever presence occupied room 4 has not been eliminated by sealing the room. It has merely relocated its activities. I propose we reopen room 4 and, if necessary, accept the concentrated mortality in that space as preferable to the distributed mortality we currently experience. One room with elevated death rates is a statistical anomaly we can manage. 8 rooms with elevated death rates is a crisis that threatens the hospital's viability. Furthermore, I recommend we maintain detailed records of room 4 outcomes for future administrators, so this decision is not reversed without full understanding of consequences. Respectfully, Dr. Robert Vogel, Hospital Director. They knew. The hospital administration knew about the collector, knew that room 4 was a containment, and chose to sacrifice patients in that room to protect everyone else. How many people had died in room 4 since 1952? I did the math. Average of 1 death every 3 weeks, times 72 years. Over 1,200 people. 1,200 people who might have lived if they'd been in any other room. But how many thousands had been saved by keeping the collector contained to one space? It was a trolley problem. Sacrifice the few to save the many. Let patients die in room 4, so patients in rooms 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 8 could live. I felt sick. I'd taken an oath, do no harm. But working at St. Catherine's meant participating in a system that deliberately placed patients in a room where they had a 64% chance of dying. I went to Barbara, showed her what I'd found. She read the documents in silence, then handed them back. I figured it was something like that, she said. Wondered why they'd reopen a room they knew was problematic. Now I know. We have to tell someone, report this, shut down the room permanently. And then what? The collector spreads to other rooms like before. We sacrifice the entire ICU to save room 4 patients. There has to be another way. Maybe. But in 70 years, nobody's found it. You think you will? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about Mrs. Vogel, about Mr. Harrison, about all the patients who died at 3:47 a.m. because they'd been unlucky enough to be assigned to room 4. Kept thinking about the collector. Who was he? Why 347? Why this room? I went back to the city archives, researched the cemetery that had been cleared to build the hospital, found records from the indigent burials, lists of names, dates of death, burial locations when recorded. Most entries were sparse. Unknown male, approximately 40 years, died of consumption, buried north section, March 1889. But one entry caught my attention. Dr. Jesse Whitmore, age 62, died March 15, 1893. Physician who dedicated final years to treating indigent tuberculosis patients without compensation. Contracted disease from patients. Died 3:47 a.m. As per his wishes, buried in Poppersfield North section to remain near those he could not save. Burial witnessed by staff of Mercy Hospital. Dr. Jesse Whitmore. Died at 3:47 a.m. of tuberculosis, buried in the north section of the Poppers Field, the section where Room 4 would eventually be built. A doctor who dedicated his life to treating tuberculosis patients, who died of the disease himself, who asked to be buried near his patients, and who, maybe, kept trying to help them even after death. I found his obituary in a newspaper from 1893. Dr. Jesse Whitmore, beloved physician to the poor, succumbed to consumption yesterday morning at precisely 3:47 a.m. In his final hours, he expressed regret for those patients he could not save and wished that death might come quickly and mercifully for those suffering from this terrible disease. If I could spare them the slow drowning, he reportedly told attending nurses, if I could take them swiftly at the darkest hour when the body is weakest, I would do so. It would be a kindness. Dr. Whitmore requested burial in the Poppers Field alongside his patients, stating he wished to remain near them even in death. At the darkest hour. 3:47 a.m., when the body is weakest. The collector wasn't a malevolent spirit. It was Dr. Whitmore, still trying to help, still taking patients swiftly, mercifully, at 3:47 a.m. when suffering was greatest. But he was taking everyone in Room 4, regardless of whether they were dying or just sick. His mercy had become indiscriminate, a collection rather than compassion. I had to know more, had to understand how a doctor's wish became a curse. I found a local historian who specialized in early medical history. Sent her what I'd discovered. She called me back within hours. Dr. Whitmore is fascinating, she said. He was a pioneer in tuberculosis treatment, but also deeply involved in what we'd now call the spiritualist movement. He believed consciousness survived death, believed that strong will and purpose could persist beyond the body. Did he ever talk about continuing his work after death? Actually, yes. I have excerpts from his personal journals. Let me read you something he wrote in 1892, year before he died. I fear I will not see the cure for this terrible disease in my lifetime. But if consciousness persists beyond death, if purpose can transcend the flesh, then perhaps my work need not end with my body. I would continue to offer mercy to those suffering, would take their pain upon myself if I could, would ease their passage when the time comes. He wished himself into the role, I said. He wanted so badly to continue helping that he bound himself to that purpose. That's one interpretation. The spiritualist movement of that era believed strong intention at the moment of death could shape the afterlife. If Whitmore died at 3:47 a.m., wishing he could still help TB patients, and if his body was buried where TB patients would eventually be housed, he got his wish. But wishes don't come with fine print. He can't tell who needs mercy and who can be saved. He just collects everyone at 3:47, like he did it at his death. Tragic, really. A doctor trying to help, trapped in an endless loop of taking lives he wanted to save. After we hung up, I sat with this knowledge. Dr. Whitmore wasn't evil. He was trapped, repeating his final wish over and over. A doctor who'd wanted to ease suffering, now causing it. Could he be reasoned with? Released? Or was he so bound to his purpose that he couldn't stop? I needed to try, because 1,200 people had died, and more would die unless something changed. The next night, I volunteered for Room 4. We had a new patient, Mr. Rodriguez, 55, post-surgical, stable but weak. I told no one what I was planning. At 3:30 a.m., I sat alone in Room 4 with Mr. Rodriguez sleeping peacefully. and I waited for the collector to arrive. At 3:40 a.m., the temperature dropped. I'd experienced it before, but this time I was prepared. This time, I was waiting. Mr. Rodriguez stirred in his sleep. His monitors showed elevated heart rate, normal for the pattern I'd documented. His breathing became shallow. 3:42 a.m. The air grew heavy, thick. I could feel the presence entering the room, even though I couldn't see anything yet. "Dr. Whitmore," I said quietly, "I know who you are. I know what you're trying to do, and I know you can hear me." The shadows in the corner deepened, coalesced into something almost visible. A shape, human-shaped, but not quite solid, like someone standing just behind frosted glass. 3:44 a.m. Mr. Rodriguez's eyes opened. He looked directly at the corner. "Don't be afraid," I told him. "He's a doctor. He thinks he's helping." The shape moved closer to the bed. I still couldn't see features, but I could feel intention, purpose, ancient, overwhelming purpose. "Dr. Whitmore, I'm a nurse, like the nurses who cared for you when you were dying. I understand what you wanted to do. Ease suffering. Offer mercy to those in pain." The presence paused, listening. "But Mr. Rodriguez doesn't need mercy. He's healing. He's going to survive. You don't need to take him." Mr. Rodriguez's heart rate spiked to 110. His oxygen saturation dropped to 90%. "You're taking everyone," I continued, "at 3:47 a.m., because that's when you died. That's when your purpose crystallized. But not everyone who's here at 3:47 needs to die. Some of them can be saved. Some of them want to live." The shape solidified slightly. I could almost see a face now, elderly, tired, so very tired. And in my mind, not words exactly, but impression of words. "I must help. It is all I am now, all I can do." "You helped for over 100 years, I said. "Maybe it's time to rest." "Cannot rest. The suffering continues. Must ease the passage. Must take them swiftly." What if there was another way? What if you could actually tell who needs mercy and who needs more time? The presence moved closer. Mr. Rodriguez gasped, his hands gripping the bed rails. "How? I am bound to this time, this place. I cannot see beyond the moment. Only feel the weakness of 3:47, the hour of death 3:45 a.m. 2 minutes left. An idea formed. Crazy. Probably impossible. But I had to try. What if I helped you see? What if I told you, each night, who needs mercy and who needs time? I'm here every night. I know the patients. I can help you help them. You would work with me? If it means innocent people stop dying, yes. But you have to trust my judgment. When I say someone can be saved, you have to let them live. Silence. The presence wavering, uncertain. This wasn't part of its purpose. Wasn't part of the pattern it had repeated for over a century. 3:46 a.m. Mr. Rodriguez's blood pressure was dropping, his heart rate climbing. The collection was beginning. "Mr. Rodriguez can be saved," I said urgently. "His surgery was successful. His infection is responding to antibiotics. He has grandchildren who need him. He's not ready to die. You have to let him go." The presence moved away from Mr. Rodriguez, drifted back toward the corner. If I let him pass, the time must still be honored. The collection must be made. It is the agreement. Then, "Take it from me," I said, before I could think better of it. "Take a piece of my life instead. Just enough to satisfy the agreement. But let him live." You would sacrifice for a stranger? That's what nurses do. That's what you did when you were alive. You sacrificed yourself caring for people who couldn't pay, people society had forgotten. I'm doing the same thing. 3:47 a.m. I felt something touch my chest. Not physical, but deeper. Like cold fingers reaching into my core. Taking something. A piece of warmth, a fragment of time. Mr. Rodriguez's monitors stabilized. Heart rate dropped back to normal. Oxygen saturation climbed to 95%. Blood pressure normalized. He was going to live. But I felt diminished, smaller, like a part of me had been carved away. The presence had fully formed now. I could see him clearly. An elderly man in outdated physician's clothing, exhausted, shoulders bent under the weight of a century of collections. You have given me a gift, his voice echoed in my mind. The first gift in 102 years. Choice. You always had choice, I said, though my voice felt weak. You just forgot. The purpose consumed you. Yes, the purpose to help, to ease suffering. But I have caused so much suffering instead. So many taken who wished to stay. I became the very thing I fought against. Death without mercy, without discernment. You can change that, starting now. Let me help you. The doctor's ghost looked at Mr. Rodriguez, sleeping peacefully now. Crisis averted. Then back at me. The agreement with the hospital, 1 room, 1 time. That cannot be changed. The land still demands payment for the graves disturbed. But perhaps the payment need not always be death. What do you mean? Life is measured in more than breaths. It is measured in moments, in time, in the spark that animates flesh. I have been taking whole lives at 3:47. But perhaps I could take less, fragments, pieces donated willingly by those who wish to spare others. Like what I just gave you. Yes. A year of your life freely given. It satisfies the agreement, allows me to spare him, and if others would offer the same. We could save everyone in room 4, as long as someone was willing to sacrifice part of their life. The ghost nodded slowly. But who would make such sacrifice? Who would give their years for strangers? I would. Every night I work. I'd give a year each time if it meant my patients lived. That is not sustainable. 3 nights a week, 50 weeks a year. You would age 150 years in 12 months. Would die before your natural span. He was right. I couldn't do this alone. But maybe I didn't have to. What if we shared it? All the night shift nurses. We rotate through room 4. Each of us gives a little when our patient is in danger. Spread the cost across many people instead of one. A collective mercy. Nurses giving years to save patients. It is beautiful and tragic. But yes, it could work if they agreed, if they understood the cost. I'll talk to them. I'll explain. Some won't agree, that's fine, but some will. Enough to make a difference. The ghost moved to the window. The first hints of dawn were lightening the sky. I have been bound here so long, trapped in this purpose. You offer me something I thought impossible. Redemption. The chance to help rather than harm. To be a physician again rather than a reaper. Will you work with me? I will, but understand, the agreement must be kept. If no sacrifice is offered, if no life is given willingly, I must take what I am owed. The collection must happen at 3:47. Those are the rules. I understand. I'll make sure someone is always here, always ready to offer years in exchange for lives. The ghost began to fade as sunrise approached. Thank you, nurse. You have done what no one has done in a century. You saw me not as a monster, but as a man trapped by his own compassion. That alone is a mercy. And then he was gone. Mr. Rodriguez woke up at 6 a.m., confused but alive. His vitals were perfect. He'd survived the night without any memory of how close he'd come to dying. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. I didn't look different, but I felt different. Older. Not physically, but in some deeper way. I'd given a year of my life, and that year was gone. I'd die at 67 instead of 68. A fair trade, but I couldn't keep doing this alone. I called a meeting with the night shift nurses. 6 of us total who rotated through. I laid out everything I'd learned. The history, the collector, Dr. Whitmore, the deal that kept him contained to room 4. Then I told them about the new arrangement. We can save the room 4 patients, I said, but it requires sacrifice. We have to volunteer years of our life in exchange for theirs, give freely so they can live. Silence. Then Barbara spoke. How many years per patient? 1 year seems to satisfy the agreement. If we rotate, if we share the burden, no one person gives too much. I'm 62, Barbara said. Been nursing for 40 years. I'll die at 82 instead of 98? That's acceptable. I'm in. I'm in too, said Jessie, one of the younger nurses. I'm 28. Got plenty of years to spare. One by one, 4 of the 6 agreed. 2 declined. They had young children. Couldn't risk shortening their lives. I understood this had to be voluntary. 4 of us is enough, I said. We'll make it work. And we did. For the next 6 months, we maintained the arrangement. Whenever a room 4 patient approached 3:47 a.m. in critical condition, one of us would be there. Would offer a year in exchange for their life. Would feel that cold touch taking a piece of time. We saved 37 patients. Gave 37 years between the 4 of us. But then administration noticed the pattern. Room 4 mortality has dropped to 8%, the ICU director said in a staff meeting. Down from 64%. That's statistically impossible. What changed? We couldn't tell the truth. Who would believe us? So we made up explanations. Better monitoring, improved protocols. Random statistical variation. They didn't believe us. Started investigating, pulled records, interviewed staff, tried to find the cause of the miraculous improvement in room 4 outcomes. That's when they decided to renovate the ICU. We're moving to the new wing, administration announced. All 8 rooms will be upgraded, new equipment, new layouts. The old ICU will be converted to administrative offices. They were going to destroy room 4. I met with Dr. Whitmore that night. Stood in the empty room. It was scheduled for demolition in 2 weeks. What happens when they tear down this room? I asked. Where do you go? The ghost materialized, looking more solid than ever before. Working with us had strengthened him somehow, given him purpose beyond mindless collection. I don't know, he admitted. I am bound to this space. When it ceases to exist, you might cease to exist too. Or I might be freed, released from the binding. After 102 years, that might be a mercy. But the agreement, if room 4 doesn't exist to contain the collection, does it spread again? Does 3:47 a.m. become dangerous everywhere? Unknown. The agreement was made with this room, this space. If the space is destroyed, the agreement may be void, or it may seek a new container. I cannot say. I talked to Barbara, to Jessie, to the other nurses who'd been helping. We agreed. We couldn't let them demolish room 4 without knowing what would happen. I went to the hospital director, asked for a meeting, brought historical records, mortality data, everything I'd compiled. There's something you need to know about room 4, I said. Something the previous directors knew. Something that's been managed quietly for 70 years. I told him everything. The collector, Dr. Whitmore, the agreement, the mortality rates when room 4 was sealed versus open, the sacrifice system we'd been using. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he sat back in his chair. You expect me to believe that we have a ghost doctor who collects souls at 3:47 a.m., and you've been trading years of your life to save patients? Yes. That's insane. Check the records. 1947 to 1952. Room 4 sealed. Mortality spread across all units. 1952 to present. Room 4 open. Mortality contained there. 6 months ago, we started the sacrifice system. Mortality in room 4 dropped to 8%. The numbers don't lie. He pulled up the data, stared at it for a long time. Even if I believed you, Nahade? I'm not saying I do. What do you want me to do about it? Don't demolish room 4. Keep it functioning. Let us continue what we're doing. The board has already approved the renovation. Millions of dollars budgeted. I can't stop it based on ghost stories. Then at least delay it. Give me time to figure out what happens when room 4 is destroyed, to prepare for whatever comes next. He considered. I can delay the room 4 demolition for 60 days. Tell the board there are structural issues that need additional assessment. But after 60 days, it's coming down. Use that time to prove I shouldn't let that happen. I had 60 days to solve a 102-year-old supernatural problem. I started by trying to understand the original agreement. How had it been made? Who had made it? Went back to 1921, when they cleared the cemetery to build the hospital. Found records of opposition. Families upset about graves being disturbed. Found newspaper articles about protests. And I found one article that mentioned Dr. Jesse Whitmore specifically. Descendants of Dr. Jesse Whitmore protest cemetery disruption. The grandchildren of Dr. Jesse Whitmore, buried in the Pauper's Field in 1893, have filed formal protest against the planned hospital construction. Our grandfather dedicated his life to helping the poor, stated Margaret Whitmore Hayes. He asked to be buried among his patients as an eternal vigil. Disturbing his grave, and the graves of those he cared for, dishonors his sacrifice. Hospital planners have agreed to a compromise. Dr. Whitmore's grave will not be moved, but will be incorporated into the foundation of the new building. A plaque will be placed honoring his service. They built room 4 directly over his grave, on purpose, as a compromise, and in doing so, they'd bound him there. Gave him the eternal vigil he'd requested, but twisted it into something he never intended. The agreement wasn't made by the hospital. It was made by the land itself, honoring Dr. Whitmore's wish to watch over his patients. But the wish had become a curse because no one had bothered to ask if he still wanted this after 28 years of death. If I could find his grave, the actual physical grave beneath room 4, maybe I could give him a choice. Release him if he wanted, or let him continue with clearer purpose. I got blueprints of the original building. Found the location of Dr. Whitmore's grave marked on the 1923 construction plans. It was 3 feet below room 4's floor in the northwest corner. I assembled a team, Barbara, Jesse, and a maintenance worker who owed me a favor. At 2 a.m., when the ICU was quiet, we went into room 4 with tools. "You're seriously going to dig up the floor?" Jesse asked. Just enough to reach the grave, to give him a choice. We pulled up the tiles in the northwest corner. Beneath was concrete. Beneath that, old wooden flooring from the sanatorium era. And beneath that, soil. At 3 a.m., we'd made a hole about 2 feet deep. Hit something solid. Not dirt, a stone, a gravestone, buried beneath the building. We cleared the soil away carefully. The stone was simple, weathered. Dr. Jesse Whitmore, 1831 to 1893. May he rest among those he served. Now what? Barbara asked. Now I talked to him. At 3:30 a.m., the room grew cold. Dr. Whitmore manifested, staring at his own gravestone exposed to light for the first time in 102 years. You found me, my true resting place. I had forgotten it was here. Dr. Whitmore, when you were buried, you wished to watch over your patients. That wish bound you here. But you never agreed to collect souls, never agreed to kill. The wish was twisted by those who built above you. I know. I realized too late what I had become. Could not stop. Could not rest. I'm offering you a choice now. We can rebury this stone, let the room be demolished, free you from the binding. Or we can mark this grave properly, acknowledge your sacrifice, and work with you. Let you be a healer again instead of a reaper. The ghost knelt by his own gravestone, touched it with transparent fingers. If I am freed, if the binding breaks, what becomes of the collection? The debt owed to the disturbed graves? I don't know. Maybe it ends. Maybe it finds a new form. But you don't have to carry this alone anymore. And if I stay? If I choose to continue? Then we work together. You guide us. Tell us who truly needs mercy versus who needs more time. We provide the sacrifice to spare the ones who can be saved. You become a consultant, not an executioner. A consultant, he almost smiled. I was a doctor once, before I became this. I would like to be a doctor again. Then stay. Help us, but on your terms, not bound by some agreement you never made. Dr. Whitmore stood. The gravestone began to glow softly. Words appeared on it, burning into the stone. Dr. Jesse Whitmore, physician, guardian, healer, eternally vigilant with compassion. I accept. I will stay. Will work with you. Will help rather than harm. This is my choice freely made. The room warmed. The oppressive feeling lifted. Something fundamental had changed. The hospital wants to demolish this room in 60 days, I said. Can you exist without it? Now that I have chosen freely, now that the binding is broken and remade on my terms, yes. I am no longer tied to this physical space. I am tied to the purpose. Wherever you need me, I can be, as long as someone remembers, as long as someone calls my name. We reburied the gravestone carefully, replaced the floor, made room 4 look normal again. The next night, we tested it, deliberately moved a critical patient to room 7 instead of room 4. At 3:45 a.m., I called quietly, "Dr. Whitmore, we need you." He appeared in room 7, checked the patient, communicated his assessment. This patient needed time, not mercy. I offered a year, he took it. The patient lived. Room 4 no longer mattered. Dr. Whitmore could go anywhere we needed him. The collector had become a consultant. The curse had become a blessing. I went back to the hospital director with this information. Told him what we'd done, what had changed. "So you're telling me the ghost is now mobile, and you're summoning him to help patients?" "Yes, and this requires keeping the ICU in the old building." "No, he can work anywhere now. We can move to the new wing, as long as we maintain the arrangement, nurses offering years in exchange for hopeless cases that can still be saved. I don't believe in ghosts. You don't have to believe. Just look at the outcomes. Since we started this, our night shift mortality dropped 47%. Patient satisfaction scores up. Staff retention improved because we feel like we're actually making a difference. He looked at the data again. Fine. I'll tell the boardroom 4 can be demolished as planned. But this arrangement you have, whatever it actually is, it continues. Those results are too good to disrupt. The ICU moved to the new wing 3 months later. Shiny new rooms, modern equipment, everything state-of-the-art. But some nights when a patient is critical, when 3:47 a.m. approaches, I call for Dr. Whitmore. And he comes, checks the patient with a physician's eye that has 102 years of experience. Tells me if they need mercy or time. If they need time, I offer a year. He takes it. They live. I'm 34 now, chronologically. But I've given 14 years. I'll die at 63 instead of 77. Barbara has given 18 years. Jesse has given 9. But we've saved 187 patients who would have died. 187 people who went home to their families. 187 lives purchased with fragments of our own. Is it worth it? Every time I see a patient walk out of ICU who shouldn't have survived, every time someone thanks me for saving their loved one, I know the answer. Yes. Absolutely yes. The hospital thinks we're just really good nurses. They don't know about Dr. Whitmore. Don't know about the sacrifice system. Don't know that 3:47 a.m. is still the dangerous hour. Just now it's managed. But we know. And Dr. Whitmore knows. And together, we turn death's appointed hour into a chance for life. That's what nurses do, what doctors do, what healers do. We stand between patients and death, and sometimes we pay with pieces of ourselves to tip the balance. Dr. Whitmore wanted to ease suffering. For 102 years, his method was mercy through death. Now, it's mercy through sacrifice, ours willingly given. He's a physician again, a healer, just one who exists between worlds, working the night shift that never ends. And I work beside him, trading years for lives, making deals with death so others can live. Every night at 3:47 a.m., I'm ready. Ready to offer. Ready to save. Ready to be the nurse who stands in the doorway between life and death and says, "Not today." Because that's what we do. That's what we've always done. Some of us just do it more literally than others.